Here we are, podcast 4.
Look at us.
I know. All right. We're going to have Vanessa Lopez on in a little bit. I can't wait for everybody to meet her if they don't already know her.
It's going to be great.
But to just kick us off a little bit, LaShawn, I'm really curious about thinking back to you as a student. If we were to sort of gather your teachers, the folks who taught you, what would they say about you?
I think that they would say all great things.
No, really, this is an honest podcast.
Oh, yeah. Okay, we're being honest.
Yeah.
I think that my teachers would probably have described me as I was a very curious kid. I was inquisitive. I always asked questions. I always wanted to know the purpose behind what we were doing all the time. I pushed boundaries a lot.
Shocking.
Imagine that, right?
It's good you grew out of that.
I'm so happy I finally grew out of that one. But I think I was a kid that I wanted to do my own thing. Like I wanted to learn.
Could you grow out of that one too?
No, I didn't. I wanted to learn what I wanted to learn about. I wanted to write what I wanted to write about. And I kind of pushed back when it was anything that went against what I wanted to do. So I'm sure I scarred a lot of teachers, and if they're listening, I'm so sorry.
Are you though?
No, not really.
Okay.
What about you, Mike?
I think my teachers, I was like a good little compliant kid. I did school well. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't like school, but I played the game really well. I was not a vocal person. I was not a troublemaker. I was and still I'm an introvert. And so that's this kind of sort of space that I lived in. So I think they would have described me like as a great, a model student. I also think they would have described me as like somebody who loved school and did well. And like, I think they would have considered me somebody that was like successful for themselves as teachers, when really my experience was I didn't love school. I didn't really want to continue in it. I had a lot of anxiety and didn't want to be there. And so like, I think when I think about that question, it's interesting because it's like a dichotomy from how they would have perceived me to my own perception and reality of the space. So, and then I want to think about what I would say to them.
Yeah.
Maybe just that.
Like, you were wrong. Welcome to the Flipped Podcast.
Or Flip Ed.
However you hear it, this is a place for joy and dreaming of education.
In each episode, you will hear from educators with an idea, a vision, a revolutionary thought that could flip a switch and change schools for our changed world.
I'm LaShawn.
I'm Mike.
Welcome to Flipped.
Welcome to Flip Ed. So we're excited to have you here, Vanessa. So Vanessa Lopez is the 24th grandchild of Tulia Vasquez López, the only daughter of Rosa Digna López, big little sister to Ramon Reynoldo Vargas, and proud mother of Aszana LilaRosa López-Bell, who is now 25.
A big grown person.
She was born and bred on the streets of New York City back when white folks didn't ride the A train past 59th Street. Vanessa has papers from Purchase College, State University of New York, and the Maryland Institute College of Art. She contemplates and writes about race, urban education, the body, and art. Vanessa's musings can be found in the pages of Moleskin journals, Souls, a critical journal of Black politics, culture, and society, Hypatia, a journal of feminist philosophy, and the Art Education Journal. She makes things grow and die. And that's like the coolest bio.
I have never heard a bio so cool. That's awesome.
So thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Did that bio come just...
I mean, I've done, the 20 million versions of the bio.
Right.
And there was a time where I would switch it for the context, and they all just started to feel empty, to be quite honest. And I think not what mattered, And like, really, I want my bio to be like Vanessa Lopez is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Period. So I've just been trying to be like, what is true? Like, what feels true right now? So.
Amazing. All right. Should we dive in?
Awesome. Yes. Well, welcome. We're so excited that you're here. Before we even dive into like your role in education, what's something that you're good at? Like what is a hidden talent or a passion or something outside of education that we may not know about?
Okay. So I have a plant. Well, I had a plant that lived to be 28 years old. It just died like 6 months ago.
Oh.
So my mom gave me this plant when I started college. And this plant has moved all over, the East Coast with me and multiple.
Wow.
So I think I can keep things alive. I think maybe that's a hidden talent.
Wow.
And I can hold a plank for pretty long.
Both are very impressive.
Did you name the plant?
Yes. Well, we named the plant, throwback to the Poonie girls at Purchase College. We were like sitting in, I guess, the common area, and we named it Bertha. So it was Bertha. But it was a ficus, so if you know anything about plants, like they're very finicky.
Yeah.
But yeah, it died, and I was just like, what am I going to do with this thing? Like, I can't get rid of it. So I have just the bark of it sitting on the mantle to do something. So I don't know if that's a hidden talent, but...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
28 years?
Yeah,
That's
right?
incredible. Oh, my gosh. Teach me your ways.
I actually kind of feel sad when plants die.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I did something, Yeah. I've gotten better at letting it go.
That's good. I'm sorry, one other question about the plant.
Right.
All this time you've only had one plant?
No,
Oh,
I have
okay.
multiple plants.
I just know if you
have
carry this
actually
one
like
plant.
50 plants in my house.
Okay, does this go to the she makes things grow and die?
I
think
make
so.
things that grow and die.
Oh, you
yeah.
make, I got you.
Yeah. So yes, but that was really about just like the art that I make.
Okay.
But I think in general, I think I have the nurturer spirit. I can make things grow.
That's beautiful. I need to remember to water my plants when I get home. So, what is your origin story as an educator? Like, what got you here?
Yeah, so I am first generation Dominican American. So born and raised in New York, and my mom came to the country when she was 17. I'm sorry, very much so that we would have an opportunity at an education. I went to LaGuardia High School in New York, and I'm saying just because it was like a very particular type of school. It was kind of, it's like a citywide school equivalent to maybe like a BSA in Baltimore. And I think I didn't realize till many years later that it was kind of a big deal to get into that school, especially in New York. And I had this amazing teacher, Miss Baird, who in like 7th grade was like, you should apply to this school. And she met with me after school and helped me put together this portfolio. And LaGuardia like radically changed my life for multiple reasons. It was like the first time I left Washington Heights. I had grown up with like mostly like Caribbean folks, Black folks. And it was a citywide school with like everybody.
Wow.
And rocked all of my ideas, like I saw like Latin kids that didn't speak Spanish, Black kids with green hair before people had green hair, like everybody has green hair now. Like white kids that were like harder than anybody had grown up with. And it like really radically changed how I thought of myself.
Wow.
But it was an art school, and it felt like it was a particular type of curriculum. And I think I left there feeling like this isn't for me. Art is very elite. I don't come from this background. And I had a guidance counselor. I wish I could find this lady. Who was like, you're not college material. And to be honest, like I definitely cut school for like almost a year, my sophomore year, because I was just going through like an identity crisis, And by the time I got it together, she was like, you're not made for this. And she was like, you should apply to the Army. And I did apply to the Army. And then I applied to like a couple of colleges, and one of them, which was SUNY Purchase. And by the time I got to SUNY, first I got in through this program called EOP, Educational Opportunity Program. Shout out to Paul Nicholson. And the program was set up for like folks who didn't do great in undergrad, but if given the opportunity, they could do really well. And I came in early, and I basically got like a full ride. And there's where I was like, oh, I actually love to learn because I could pick what I wanted to learn. But I think I still was kind of like, I don't know about art. This isn't for me. So I studied art history, which clearly there was no guidance because in my mind I was like, I'll get a job doing art history. I also had my daughter while I was in college. And then fast forward, ended up in Baltimore. I used to have this joke that I was like, people come to Baltimore for 2 reasons, Hopkins or love. I have since expanded it to school or love. And I came for love. And then when it didn't work, I stayed. And I was working all of these like non-for-profit jobs in the city. I was like raising money for Maryland Arts Council. I was like doing some lobbying, and it felt really empty. Like I was like, I am raising money from really rich people for the arts, and I'm not giving back in any way. And so I was like, I should teach. And I did Baltimore City teaching residency. So I did alternative route to teaching. I was a bad kid in school. So I didn't think I was going to be a teacher. But I think that's actually what made me a good teacher because I remember all the shit I did in the classroom. Like, I was like, like it's one of those like where you're standing and the kids are like, how do you know? Do you have eyes behind the back of your head? And I'm like, no, because I'm you. And I totally would have done the same thing. So, so I came through Baltimore City teaching residency. That was about like 20 something years ago. And it was my calling. Like that was when I was there, I was like, oh yeah.
Wow.
I knew I always cared about art. I always cared about kids, so it just felt right. Yeah. It felt like the right match.
What was your best day as an educator?
Oh, I think by the time, now I teach teachers, like future teachers. And by the time I left, so like my last year teaching, I was teaching middle school. I was teaching at Roland Park Elementary Middle. And by that point, I had been there long enough and the kids knew me that it wasn't even like I was really like a facilitator, like we would have this board of just like ideas and things they cared about. And they just picked something and explored it. And the only caveat was you needed to engage the community in some way. So like really I was just sitting there giving them resources or like thinking through ideas. And I remember sitting, I had the desk at one point, but I remember sitting at the desk and watching all of them and being like, this is great. They don't need me. Yeah. Like they don't need me. Right. They're good. That was a great feeling. And it felt worthwhile what they were doing. Like, yes.
That's awesome.
So, I'm really excited because I have no idea what you're going to say when we ask you this question. But I know I'm excited about whatever it is. So really the idea is like this podcast is about what is the flip? The thing that if you could, for a classroom or for a whole system or whatever it is, but if you could really make one flip and transform it all, like what do you think is the key lever? So yeah, what's your flip?
All right. This one I did think about. So I think where I went to first was, I think in the message that you guys sent me, it was like one flip that would inspire hope, innovation, creativity or something. And first of all, I harped on hope. Like I was like, hope. Because I think hope is so full of shit. Yeah. Like I think hope is so naive of us, And I think hope ties to that one thing, like hope in my mind has me thinking of like one savior, one idea. And I don't think it's going to work that way, and then your question brought me to, like the greater question really behind it is like, what's the purpose of education, right? And we all know what the original purpose was, but if we're thinking about like, what is the purpose now? Like given this time right now that we're in, like why education, why school, what are we supposed to learn and what are we supposed to be teaching? And I'll kind of go roundabout it to the answer, but I think what I am seeing. So again, like I said, I teach now future teachers. So they're coming to be public school pre-K through 12 teachers. And And I still have the privilege of going into classrooms sometimes with my teacher candidates to co-teach. And I really see both in young people in schools and in the young adults that I'm teaching, like a fear, you know, this intense fear of even like their inner landscape, like this inability to really look at what is going on inside. How do I access it? How do I sit with it? You know, I think that's part of what's happening with the phones, right? I think we're trying to escape. I think we're numbing out. And then I think some kids are like vibrating, like so high because they don't know what to do with it. Right. And I think it's the same even with the people I teach who are going to be the future teachers. You know, I think we are all dysregulated, you know, and I think that's why you have this movement of like self-help, which I think is actually not what we should be doing. I think the self-help is like hope. It's like, let's fix this thing, you know, rather than let's learn how to feel it. Let's learn how to like be with it.
Sure.
Let's learn how to metabolize it, you know, and chew it and like let it go. And I think if I'm, you know, honest, I think what we're like scared of looking at is just the reality right now, you know, that is heavy and it's only gotten heavier. I mean, it's freaking February, y'all. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, 2025. Like, all right, here we go. And I think it's only going to get heavier. And I think behind that, I think is ultimately grief. You know, I think the children are grieving. I think the adults are grieving. I think the adults, you know, there used to be time where people would, like, they knew how to grieve, you know. Like, so I think I told you all I'm first generation Dominican. Like, bro, a funeral is there's people crying, there's people passing out. And I remember being young, being like, okay, all right, like, that's a lot, you know. But they were metabolizing that grief, you know. And I think, you know, it's 2025. The pandemic just happened, you know. We did this like, let's get back to normal. Nothing is normal, you know? So I think part of what we're grieving is that what we've created isn't working. Sure, and we know it's not working, you know, but we don't know how to put it to rest with with some honor, you know? So there is this writer, Vanessa Camacho de Oliveira, I think is how you say her last name. She wrote this book, Hospicing Modernity. And I think that's where we're at right now. We're in this time of like, how do we put things to rest? So, so I think to the flip, right, is how do we get ourselves in right proportion, like like right size ourselves as humans, right? Because I think what we are showing children is overconsumption, irresponsibility, hierarchy, dichotomies, super competition. That's what school is, competition, you know. And I think to that greater question, like, what is the purpose of education? If you think the purpose of education is to graduate and have a great job and be rich, you're going to have a different answer to this question. Sure. I don't think the purpose of education is to be rich. I don't think that's the purpose of being a grown-up, is to be rich. You know, I think really growing up requires like, you know, cleaning our eyes, sobering up. I think that's what education teaches you, is like how to grow up. And I think we're teaching kids how to be self-absorbed right now, you know. So I don't have that one right fix, but I do think some of it is sitting with discomfort, you know, slowing the fuck down. We're trying to cover too many things.
And do it fast and with urgency.
And you don't walk away with anything because you don't have enough time to go deep into something to realize that you can't figure anything out. There's not one answer to the thing, but we keep running around doing 20 million things, you know? You know, so I think some of it is like, how do we sit enough with the discomfort to realize this is falling apart? And I'm going to be morbid. What would happen if we started education with knowing, like, impermanence? Like, you're going to die. Like, we're all sitting here and we're going to die. I mean, obviously, we're not going to say that to a kindergartner. But if there is,
right.
you know, if we understand, like, there's a responsibility to being here. You're not here forever, right? So what does it mean to be here? What does it mean to be present in this experience? What's your responsibility? So I think, you know, learning yourself, a deep knowledge of yourself in order to forget yourself, right? So that you can find yourself in everything and everyone else. And by things, I mean actually like the world.
Right.
Like, yeah, we're out of proportion. We're like, human beings are out of proportion. Right. We think we could solve all this stuff. We cannot solve it. But we could maybe die with some dignity. You know, we could maybe use the time that we have here to do it well for whoever's going to come. Because more are going to come, but at some point, we're all dying. Yeah. So can we do it with some dignity? And again, like, I've never been, even with my kid, I think that's the point I'm at now with, like, this young adult where I'm like, oh, shit. Do I believe all the things that I said to her? Yeah. You know, because I was always like, life is an adventure. Live life as an adventure. But I really believe that if you're here and you got this one wild life, what are you going to do with it? You know, and that grief that we're feeling, there's so much trauma. We now have all this language about trauma, intergenerational trauma. Yeah. But what do we do with it? How do we metabolize it?
Yeah.
So do you... there's so much in that. Do you even imagine a starting point for it? Like, do you imagine, like, is this just like a call for like all of us to do this work individually? Or could you imagine?
No, I don't think it's I think it can't be individually.
So where is the space where that, is school the space where that happens? Is, you know, like, where do we do the work?
So I think, one, we lost this opportunity in COVID, right? Like, we had this opportunity where it was like, oh my God, right? And we could have done it so differently. Instead, we're like, let's do school in front of the TV, right? Mm-hmm. But we could have been like, what is it to be in relationship with your neighbors? We could have been like, meet the people around you. We could have learned how to care for each other, right? Like, that could have been school. It could have happened so differently. So what I think is the role of a school now, I think the school is like a community center. I think that's what school needs to be. But I also think the school day needs to look really differently, right? It needs to be a lot slower. There needs to be a lot less happening, right? It needs to be a place where maybe elderly people can come in, right? It needs to be a place where the family member who didn't make the best life decisions and is now at home doing nothing can come back and maybe get another chance. And we can see that, oh, nobody's dispensable. Well, you can always keep coming back. I think it needs to be a community hub. And I'm totally making up this answer right now.
Good.
Like, but honestly, that's what it feels like. This little sink can't function outside of where it is.
Right.
Like, where is it? And what's happening here? And what's the problem of this place?
Mm-hmm. So where, I mean, I think everything you just said is actually a challenge to all of us. Like, you know, partly to rethink it all, but partly to rethink about our space in it and the work to do. But like, if we're assuming there's going to be a lot of teachers listening to this at some point. Like, what's your challenge to them? Like, what's your starting point? What, you know, some folks are going to feel I'm not in a positionality to you know, create a whole different thing, right? Some people might be. Let's do it. Let's rethink it completely. But like, where do you challenge people to start?
Well, I mean, I think you always start with yourself. I think, you know, just like when you posed this question to me, it made me think, like, what do I ultimately think is the purpose of education?
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's a conversation we need to be having among ourselves. Like, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
You know, am I doing it so that, you know, Mike and LaShawn can grow up to be billionaires? Or am I doing it so that they can grow up and have a a healthy life?
Yeah.
And what does it mean to have a healthy life? And I think there are tons of small ways that we can do it in the classroom. But I think if you're not regulated, you're not going to be able to regulate somebody else. So what are you over consuming, right? Where are you? And I'm not sitting here like I've figured this out, but I think these are the questions that I'm asking myself. Like, what am I at odds with in myself? You know, where am I not sitting in the complexity of this? You know, what am I signing on to?
What would you say to the folks who conflate? I just had this conversation with somebody the other day. Not this exact one, but what would you say to somebody who sort of conflates like you said, what does it mean to be successful as a human is not about becoming a billionaire, right? But what about those folks who conflate like, if I don't meet all this, if my kid doesn't meet all of the standards and they don't actually know how to do pre-calculus by the time they leave high school, then they won't be successful, right? Like sort of the academic part of how people think about what success means and what you need to have access to all the other things that have built up
1,000%. I mean, but we're talking about like a larger system that we're all playing in, right?
Sure.
I mean, when was the last time you used pre-calculus?
I didn't even use pre-calculus when I took pre-calculus.
Exactly.
So it's like a hoop, you know, and I get it because I had a young adult. I raised a young adult and I remember being scared. Like, how do I give this child these experiences to make sure that she's set up for success?
Right.
So I get it, you know. And now that she's grown, I'm like, oh, what matters? And I can see the harm that I did, right? I can see the harm that did, where she's running for something. And I'm like, what are you running for? So I don't know. I just know that so I'm an art educator. I don't even know if I said that. So I think the one thing that the arts do is like, the only thing I can teach is like, you have an imagination. And so what I'm seeing is like, we have a real lack of imagination. Like we have a real lack of imagination of how we could be living this. And I grew up poor, so I'm not saying be poor. I'm not, I don't want to glamorize that. Right. I think we all need to live, you know. I don't know what that middle ground is. I just know that this isn't working. Yeah. I know it's not working, and I know we're not raising young people that feel excited about life, you know, and what they're coming into in life is very different than what each of us came into. They're coming into a world that is falling apart. So I don't know what it looks like, but I know that they need to sit with some discomfort. You know, I know that they need to imagine something else, because if we keep hoping that we're going to fix this, we're not going to fix this. We're going to maybe come up with something else. You know, it's like I told my daughter, do I think my great-grandchildren are going to shop at Sephora? Probably not. Do I think they'll die? No. I think they'll learn how to live otherwise. You know, maybe we'll go back to how my mother's grew up, where you're in this community and your family's close to you and you have to sustain yourself in a different way. You know, I don't know what it looks like, but I definitely know that this isn't working. And I definitely know, and I love school. I love school. I love the energy of coming into a school, but I know it's not working. And I know it because I see it in the kids. They know it's not working. And we know it's not working, but we're all like, but I got to do. And I know we do. I don't know. I don't know. That's also my latest answer. I don't know.
And when you think about grief, like, I imagine all of the teachers coming into this with the hope of like being able to really transform education in some way, and then sitting in the reality quickly of like, this isn't working. Like that is grief for folks who get into this work with the heart of like, I want to transform. But a lot of what you said is like, imagine if we centered free thinking and imagination and dreaming at the core of all the work that we do, so that our kids have an understanding of who they are in their community and outside of it. And if that was what we centered, like, I could only imagine what they would grow up to be.
Yeah, I think it's like, who am I? Where am I?
Yeah.
And what's my responsibility here? Right?
And those are great questions to start with.
I mean, great, sure. Somebody's using that.
Sure.
And we need those people. But most of us don't use that.
What were those three questions again? Who am I? Where am I? And what's my responsibility?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
I have one more question, unless there's any more you want to say about that.
No, I mean, I think, I think school's supposed to teach you how to grow up.
Yeah.
How to be like a grown-up, like an accountable, like grown-up that owns their shit, like takes care of each other. You don't even have to balance your checkbook anymore. Like, you don't. I mean, think about it. Like, the computer does that shit. Yeah. Like, it's this. We go to school for this.
Sure.
Because it's the only time you're around somebody that's not your family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I want to just know, as we sort of close out, you mentioned early on when you were telling your story of growing up that you sort of threw in a little thing of like, I wish I could find that guidance counselor.
I was going to say that, yeah.
Do you have the same question I do?
Go for it. Which
is, so if you did find her, like, what would you say to her right now?
Look at me now, bitch.
Wow. So there were so many great nuggets in that. What's a takeaway for you, Mike? What are you walking away with? Just one, because I know you have a lot.
I know. I feel like this particular, well, all of them have been great, but I feel like I'm going to be sitting with this one for a while to really try and make meaning. I mean, figure out how to synthesize the meaning for myself, right? Like, I just think that notion of like the work of, what were those three questions again? Who am I? Where am I? And what is my purpose?
Yeah.
Or what is my responsibility? I feel like if we were to ask that question and then center our schools around that, like I think, or what we're doing in a classroom together or our work with children, that to me feels like a really concrete thing. But just the need to really be with our own complexity and grief and humanness and humanity, and how do we make schools just deeply human places where we can be and grow into humans together.
Yeah,
I want to be there. What about you?
Well, firstly, I would be so interested to hear how students would answer those questions. And I would be so interested to hear how those questions change as students change and they like learn themselves and they grow within their community. That would just be something amazing. I'm sitting with a lot. I'm still in this place of imagining like school as a hub, like as a community hub. Like imagine if our schools really centered like the place where we are healing and we are confronting trauma and we are trying to treat the whole child like in a place where they go and they not only learn how to imagine themselves in the best version of themselves, but also have access to all of the things that they need in one place. Like what an opportunity we have in this, but don't actually use.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of conversation about community schools and whole child, and those things are good and great, but like I almost heard her as like more than a community hub. I almost heard it as like, how do we create schools that are like a human hub?
Human hub.
Right? Like really about all the parts of our humanity and connections and neighbors, and not just like what are the services we need, but like who are all the people that we need in our space to like be a full human. Yeah.
I can see it. It's amazing.